Hi everyone, today's video will be about standard form, how to convert numbers to standard form, as well as how to convert from standard form back to an ordinary number. So we'll be looking at a couple of examples shortly. Okay, so the first thing that's quite important in this is knowing how to write a number in standard form and what exactly standard form is. So I'll just write down what it is to write a number in standard form over here in this formulae box. So if you are writing a number in standard form, it's got to be in this format. So a times by 10 to the power of b. Okay, now a just stands for any number that is less than 10 but greater than or equal to 1. Okay, so that means it's got to be a number that can equal 1 or 1.1, 1.2, etc., and go all the way up to 9.9999 recurring, but it cannot equal 10. Okay, otherwise it won't be classed as standard form. And then you've always got the multiplication sign in the middle, times by a power of 10, and that power is what b stands for, and b can be any positive or negative whole number. Okay, so it's just I'll just write down any positive or negative whole number, so an integer whole number. Okay, I'll write that for short. E.g. -3, +10, or a big number like even 50. Okay, just depending on what your number is like. Okay, so that's what standard form is and how to write something in standard form. And now we'll take a look at some examples as to how that actually plays out. So the first example is the Earth is roughly this many years old. Write this in standard form. So I'll spare me reading this to you, big number to you. So we'll write this. So as you can see, standard form can be used to write really big numbers, such as this one over here. And we can write it in a more simpler version, which is standard form, looking like this. So let's take a look at how to actually do that. So we need to first find out what our a should be. So it's got to be, we know, in between 1 and 10. And we've got this big number over here. So that means we're just going to be looking at, for a, the non-zero bits. So these are the non-zero digits, 4,543, and I need to try and write that in standard form. Okay, and because a has got to be less than 10, that means that a will be a decimal number in this case, so that I can include all my non-zero digits. So it would look like 4.543. Okay, and we don't have to include all those zeros because they will come when we show our multiplication and 10 to the power of whatever b will be. Okay, so it's 4.543 times by 10. To work out the power, we need to be counting our decimal places that we've moved to the left hand side, okay, in this case. So if I start from here, I can count all the way up to in between 4 and 5, because that's where I've placed my decimal point, and that will give me what b should be, so that we can put this number back to its original form after multiplication. Okay, so let's check. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so we've made 9 jumps. So that means it's going to be 4.543 times by 10 to the power of 9. Okay, in order to make this number in standard form. Then the next example we're going to look at is Facebook has more than this many active users worldwide. Write this in standard form. Okay, So again, I need it in this format. So I need to work out what my A is. My A can only be between 1 and 10. Therefore, it's got to be between your 2 and 6. Okay, so that means it's going to be 2.6, okay, times by 10 to the power of however many decimal places I've moved all the way back to get me to 2.6. Okay, so if we start from here, and I'll use a different color pen just to show you the jumps. So if I'm starting from here, from the end, and counting my jumps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so it's times by 10 to the power of 9. That will help us get back to our original number. So if I was to multiply this out, that will get me back to this big number. So it's just a nicer way of writing a really big number. Then the third example is the Earth has a diameter of this many meters. Write this in standard form. Okay, so again, I need my A to be between 1 and 10. So, but I've still got to remember to include in my A all of my non-zero digits. Okay, so that means I need to include my 2, 7, 4, 2, and 1. But bearing in mind, it can only be between 1 and 10, my A value. So that means it's got to be, I've got to have a decimal point in between the 1 and the 2. So it will look like 1.2. But I've also got to remember to include my 7, 4, and 2 because they're part of what makes this number over here, and I cannot just ignore them. Okay, otherwise when I multiply out my numbers, I won't be getting these digits in my answer. So it will look like 1.2742 times by 10 to the power. Now, in order to work out the power, again, I'm going to start right from the end, include a little decimal point and count my jumps, because if we look at this number, originally the decimal point would be here at the end and it will be 0.0. Okay, if I was to write this in decimal form, it will just look like this. So in order to count how many times I've gone back to the left side in order to get this number, you need to start counting. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so excuse the squiggly jumps, but it is 7 jumps. So therefore, the answer should be 1.2742 times by 10 to the power of 7. Okay, so that's that example. Then we're moving over now to some different types of numbers. So as you can see, this is quite a small number that we're looking at. So a grain of sand has a diameter of 0.0024 inches. Write this in standard form. So before we've been looking at some examples of big, large numbers and putting them in standard form. Now we'll look at how we've got really small numbers and we're going to change them into standard form. So you might look at this and say, oh, maybe it kind of already looks like in standard form because it's in decimal form, which is kind of what we did here, and put them in decimal numbers for the A part. But it's actually not in standard form because 0.0024 is not between 1 and 10. Okay, it's smaller than 1. So we've got to change it in order to match the criteria for standard form. So I need to think about where can I move my decimal point in order to make this valid for a standard form. Okay, so I can see that if I was to move my decimal point to the right this time, 3 times, okay, then the number will become 2.4, which is now looking more like standard form, okay, with the A part of the standard form, because it's in between 1 and 10. Okay, if we left it here before the 2, then it would not be correct either, because that will be 0.24, which is less than 1. We want it to be bigger or equal to 1. So it's 2.4 times by this time 10, and now we need to think about my B, so the power of 10. So when I'm to multiply 2.4 by a power of 10, it should go back to this original number. Now, we know that with powers of 10, we can have negative powers as well, like I mentioned here before, for what b can be. Okay, in this case it will be a negative power because our number was actually smaller to start off with, and we've actually made it bigger in our answer here. So I'll just see that when I started from here, how many times have I jumped? So it's once, twice, and 3 times. So it's times by 10 to the power of minus 3. So if I am to multiply this out, I will be going back 3 times, okay, my decimal point, moving it 3 times back, which will lead me back to 0.0024. Okay, so that is how you do that one. Let's take a look at another one. So we've got a DNA chain is approximately 0.000022 millimeters long. There's quite a lot of zeros. Write this in standard form. So you can see from the way I've read it that if you were to read it, it's just not practical because there's a lot of zeros that you are having to say, which is why standard form is handy to use, and which is why we use standard form. So I want to write this in standard form. For my A part, again, I need my number to be between 1 and 10 strictly. So that means I need to move my decimal place, and moving it to the right this time because it's a small number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so it's going to be going in between the 2 and the 2. So it becomes 2.2, that's my A part, times by 10 to the power, again, I'm going to have a minus power because I've made my number bigger and it was originally smaller. Okay, so when I multiply this out, it should be getting back to its original smaller form. Now, in order to work out what my B should be, so my power, I just need to count my jumps. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and that's that one. And then for the last example, we've got a grain of pollen has a diameter of 0.00002 meters. Write this in standard form. Okay, so this one is slightly tricky again because it can kind of trick some people into thinking, oh, okay, so I've just got 2 there, so I'll just make my A will just be 0.2, when in fact it cannot be 0.2 because A has got to be between 1 and 10, so 0.2 is smaller than 1. We need it to be bigger. Okay, so let's make our jumps and see where we should be landing in order to write this correctly in standard form. So starting from here, we should be landing after the 2, okay, in order to write this accurately in standard form. So it would become 2. Okay, you can write it, leave it as 2, or some people even prefer to write 2.0. They're both completely fine, but 2 should be fine as well. So I'm just going to stick with 2 times by 10, and again we're going to need a minus power because we made our number bigger. And I'm just going to count my jumps. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so therefore it's 2 times by 10 to the power of minus 5. Okay, so it's 2 times by 10 to the power of minus 5, and that's the final answer. Okay, so next we're just going to be looking at some more wordy style problems related to standard form, but we've actually got them already written in standard form numbers. And we've got to change them into normal numbers, okay, or an ordinary number. Then you've got an exam question here as well. So I'll go through these examples. If you want at any point, you can pause the video and have a go at doing it yourself, and then check by playing it and just check how I went through it myself, okay, to mark your answer. So we'll take a look at the first one. So we've got 3.25 times by 10 to the power of 9, okay. So this many hours of video are viewed every month on YouTube. Write this as an ordinary number. Okay, so in order to make it into an ordinary number, we've just got to do the reverse of what we were looking at before on the previous sheet. Okay, so we know this is our number 3.25, so I'll just write that down, 3.25. Here I'll get my green pen on again for the jumps, and we know that it's been multiplied by 10 to the power of 9, okay? Therefore, I need to make 9 jumps, okay? So I need to multiply this number by 10 to the power of 9. So the decimal point is going to move towards the right because it's getting bigger, because the power is positive. It's not going to move the other way around because it's not getting smaller, it's getting bigger. So I'm going to move this decimal point 9 times to the right, and let's see where it takes us. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. So these jumps are already covered by 2 and 5. The ones that are empty, we're just going to cover them with zeros, fill them in, sorry, with zeros. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 zeros. Okay, and now we'll finally rewrite this, but without our decimal point there. Okay, so it should equal 325, and then we've got our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 zeros. Okay, so this is what our answer should be looking like. Okay, now let's take a look at the next example. So we've got Mars is 1.647 times by 10 to the power of 8 kilometers from Earth. Write this as an ordinary number. So again, we'll write our, let's just get my blue pen on again, number. So it's 1.647, and we know that it's going to be multiplied by 10 to the power of 8. Okay, and it's a positive 8, therefore moving to the right again and making our jumps. So with my green pen, I'm going to start from where the decimal point is and move it 8 places. So make 8 jumps and see where it lands us. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8, and cover my empty jumps with zeros. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Okay, so that leaves me with an answer of the following. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. Okay, so that is the answer to that one. And then we've got a Y chromosome is 1.5 times by 10 to the power of minus 6 millimeters long. Write this as an ordinary number. So from the question, you can see that this time we've got a minus power. Okay, it's minus 6. So therefore, we're actually going to move our decimal point to the left because the number is going to be smaller. Okay, so with my green pen, I'm going to start from where the decimal point is and make 6 jumps towards the left. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. Fill the empty slots with zeros. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so therefore my actual number should be, so that is my final answer. Ultraviolet light has a wavelength of 6 times by 10 to the power of minus 8 meters. Write this as an ordinary number. Okay, so again, if we start off with our 6, it's a minus 8, which is the power. That means I need to move to the left with my jumps, okay, because the number is getting smaller. So in this one, you can see we've not actually got a decimal point to start off with like we did in the previous questions. Okay, so we need to add our own decimal point this time. Okay, so that means I need to add my 6.0 just so I know where I'm starting with my jumps from. I'm not starting from here, I'm going to start from here because that's where my decimal point is. Okay, remembering that 6 can also be written as 6.0. It's the same number. So I'm going to start from here and move backwards, count 8 times. So I've got 1 jump, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, just about made it. And then fill in the jumps with zeros. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. We've got 7 zeros. Now if I neaten this up and write it as an ordinary number without all those jumps, then that means I should have 0 point. Okay, so these zeros are all there that I need to include in my answer, but this 0 is just in front of the decimal point. Okay, so I've got 7 zeros now. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and then finally my 6. And of course I don't need to add my 0.0 after that. Okay, that was just what I started off with and part of my working out. So this should be our final answer. And then lastly, we've got an exam question, which is write 4.7 times by 10 to the power of -1 as an ordinary number. Okay, so yeah, exam questions in your GCSEs, you can get these as 2 markers or 1 markers, okay, or you can get them embedded into a word problem, which is slightly longer with more parts and more various other topics as well linked inside that question. But sometimes you can get straightforward ones, which is just simply asking you for the conversion. So that means I am doing my 4.7. Okay, I'll write that down first, and it's multiplied by a times by 10 with a negative power. Okay, that means again I'm going to be moving my decimal point in my 4.7 towards the left because the number is going to get smaller. Okay, so that means I'm going to go once backwards. Okay, just once only. So that means I don't need to really add any extra zeros. It will just be 0.47. Okay, that's all what the number will be. And that was as simple as that. Okay, so that is all of standard form, just the conversions, converting to standard form and to an ordinary number. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments section and I will be answering them. Okay, thank you for watching.